The hall was quiet except for the soft sound of a rag moving across the wooden floor. He knelt down, pressing it gently, moving it in slow circles. The wood looked old, scratched in places, but shining under his careful touch. His hands were rough from work, calloused from years of labor, yet they moved with care and precision. He paused for a moment, wiped the sweat from his brow, and looked around. The room was empty, except for the faint echoes of laughter from the afternoon practice that had just ended. Chairs were stacked neatly in the corner, and the stage lights hung silently above, waiting for the next day. He had been doing this job for years, always arriving before anyone else and staying after everyone had gone. He straightened up and ran, his hand along the edge of the stage. It felt smooth now, almost alive under his touch. Sometimes when he was alone like this, he let himself imagine that he was not just a man cleaning a stage, but someone who belonged here. Someone who could make the space sing with life. He had learned early in life that work had to be done, that responsibilities came first. The dreams he once held were tucked away neatly, like old letters in a drawer, too precious to throw away. Too painful to open too often, he remembered the piano as he had seen it the first time. Sitting there in the corner of the stage, old but dignified. Its black lacquer had dulled in some places, and a few keys were chipped. But to him, it was not broken. It was waiting for someone to bring it back to life. He brushed off a small layer of dust from the keys, watching the tiny particles float in the soft afternoon light that streamed through the windows. He imagined the sound it could make, imagined filling the room with music again. The thought made his heart ache in a way that only memory could. He rose to his feet and looked out at the empty hall. He had walked this floor thousands of times, carrying equipment, lifting chairs, wiping surfaces. No one paid attention to him. People came and went, speaking to each other, rehearsing lines, clapping hands, adjusting microphones. And he was there, always behind the scenes, always unnoticed. It was not a complaint. He was used to it. Life had taught him that not everyone could see the effort behind the scenes, that some things had to be done for the sake of love. For the sake of duty, his mind wandered to his child, who was waiting for him at home. The thought brought a small, tired smile to his face. He remembered how he had promised to always do his best to make life better, to protect the little one from the harshness he knew too well. Every polish of this floor, every hour spent working alone, was for that promise. He thought about dinner, homework, bedtime stories, and the small laughter that made all the hard work worth it. The weight of responsibility pressed on him, but it was familiar. Comforting in its own strange way, he returned to the stage, kneeling once more. The rag was rough against his palm, but he didn't mind. Each movement of the cloth over the wood was like a small meditation, a rhythm that matched the quiet beat of his heart. As he worked, he noticed small imperfections, tiny scratches, and dull spots that required extra attention. He focused, letting the task occupy his mind fully, letting the outside world fade. For these moments, it was just him and the floor, the rag and the shine, the empty hall and the silence. From time to time, he glanced at the piano again. He could not resist it. The instrument was like a friend who had waited patiently for years. He brushed his fingers lightly over a few keys, hearing a soft sound that made him pause. The note was not perfect, slightly off in pitch, but it still carried something. It carried memory. It carried longing. He closed his eyes and imagined the music that could flow from it. Imagined the hall filled with sound. Imagined people stopping to listen. The thought made him tremble slightly. Music had always been a part of him, though life had forced him to hide it, to leave it behind like an old coat that no longer fit. He stood again, stretching his back and shoulders. The work was tiring, but there was a strange satisfaction in seeing the stage shine. It was honest work, work that required effort and care. He could feel the smoothness under his fingertips, the reflection of the light on the polished wood. He stepped back and admired his work for a moment. The stage looked almost new, ready for whatever performance would come next. Yet, he could not shake the feeling that it was waiting for him. Waiting for more than just cleaning. Outside, The sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the hall. He paused by the doorway, taking in the empty space, listening to the soft creak of the floorboards under his feet. He could almost hear the echoes of past performances, the applause, the laughter, the music. The silence was heavy, but it held a kind of promise. A promise that something could happen here, something that could change everything. If only the moment came right. He thought about the people he had seen today, rehearsing and chatting, excited for what was coming. They were unaware of the man who had worked all day behind the scenes, unaware of the care he had taken to prepare the stage. And yet, he did not mind. He was used to being invisible, to doing things for the sake of others without expecting recognition. Life had shown him that fulfillment often came quietly, in small acts of effort and love. He walked slowly to the piano again. This time, he could not resist. He sat down, resting his hands lightly on the keys. They felt cold, but comforting, familiar. He pressed one key, then another, letting the sound fill the empty hall. It was soft at first, hesitant, unsure. But there was something in it, something that spoke louder than words. He closed his eyes and allowed himself a small, private smile. For a brief moment, it felt like coming home, like touching a part of himself that had been hidden for too long. The sound echoed off the walls, blending with the quiet creak of the floor and the gentle hum of the lights. He played a few more notes, testing the piano, letting the music find its own shape. There was no audience, no applause, just the empty hall and the music, and it was enough. It reminded him of a time when life had been simpler, when music had been everything. And for a moment, he allowed himself to remember, to feel, to hope. He leaned back slightly, resting his hands on the keys, listening to the silence that followed. He thought of his child again. Imagined sharing this moment one day. Imagined teaching them to find joy in simple things, in honest work, in music. The thought warmed him, made the exhaustion from the day fade just a little. He felt connected not only to the piano and the stage, but to life itself, to the small acts of care that made it worth living. The hall was quiet, almost reverent in its stillness. He stood and stretched, looking once more at the polished floor, the piano, the empty chairs. Everything was ready for tomorrow, ready for the performances, ready for the people who would come and fill the space with noise and energy. But for now, it was his, a small sanctuary where he could feel whole again. He smiled faintly, knowing that tomorrow would bring work, responsibility, routine. But tonight, he had music, memory, a quiet sense of hope. He gathered his things slowly, wiping his hands, checking the stage one last time. The floor gleamed under the dimming light. The piano waited patiently. The chairs remained neatly stacked. He felt a strange satisfaction, a calm that only came from completing something well, from giving his best, even when no one was watching. He walked toward the door, pausing for a moment to look back. The hall seemed to watch him too, silent and understanding. He stepped outside, feeling the cool evening air, the quiet streets around him. The city had its own rhythm, its own sounds, but for now, he carried the memory of the hall, the shine of the stage, and the soft sound of the piano in his heart. He walked home slowly, thinking about dinner, bedtime stories, the small smiles and laughter that waited there. Life was hard, yes, but moments like this reminded him why he kept going, why he kept working, why he never gave up on the small, precious pieces of joy that made it all worthwhile. As he reached his small apartment, he took a deep breath, ready to step into the world of responsibilities and love that awaited him. Yet, in the back of his mind, the piano hummed, waiting, promising that one day, maybe soon, the music would speak to more than just him. For now, though, he was content to finish the day, to carry the quiet satisfaction of work well done, and the small spark of hope that made him believe in something greater, even in silence. He woke up early, long before the sun was fully up, as he did most mornings. The apartment was quiet, only the faint hum of the heater and the occasional creak of the floorboards breaking the silence. He moved slowly, careful not to wake the child who was still asleep in the next room. Making breakfast was always a challenge because he had to balance time and energy, but he had learned to make it work. toast, eggs, and a small glass of juice. Simple things that filled the stomach and started the day. The child stirred, rubbing sleepy eyes and giving a small smile when he saw him. He had become used to mornings like this, to the quiet rhythm of preparing for the day, dressing his child, packing a small lunch, reminding them to brush their teeth and comb their hair. Every small action was a labor of love. He never complained, though some days it was harder than others. He thought about the bills, the rent, the groceries, all the responsibilities that rested on his shoulders. Alone, the weight was heavy, but he carried it without complaint because he had to. Life had given him this role, and he had Jacinto embrace it fully as they left the apartment. He held the child's hand, feeling the warmth and trust in that simple gesture. The walk to the bus stop was short, but full of little conversations, questions, and laughter. These moments were precious, even though they were small. He knew that one day, these simple walks and shared jokes would become memories that both of them would hold close. The thought made him smile quietly to himself, even as the early morning chill bit at his cheeks. At work, he was careful to focus on his tasks, yet his mind wandered often. The stage, the piano, the quiet moments from yesterday still lingered in his mind. He thought about the music he used to play, about the hours spent learning and practicing, about the dreams he had once held close. But life had changed, as it often does, and he had to put those dreams aside to ensure the child had a future. To make sure there was always food on the table and a roof over their heads, the child was in his thoughts throughout the day. He imagined the small hands on the piano keys, the curiosity, the fascination that music could bring. He remembered his own father, who had loved music but never had time to share it, and he realized that he did not want history to repeat itself. He wanted his child to know that joy could be found in simple things, in effort, and in creativity. Music was a bridge to those lessons, a way to show that life was not only about work and responsibility. During his lunch break, he sat alone, eating quietly and watching people pass by. Some were hurrying to meetings, some chatting with friends, some lost in their own worlds. He felt a sense of distance from them, as if he were watching life through a glass wall. Not lonely exactly, but separate. He had his purpose, his child, his work, and that was enough. Yet a small part of him ached for connection, for someone to understand the life he lived, the choices he had made, the sacrifices that were invisible to the world after work. He returned to the stage, as he often did, to finish polishing and preparing for the next day. The floor gleamed under his careful touch, and he took pride in the work that no one noticed. Yet there was a quiet joy in it, in knowing that he had done well, that he had given his best. He moved around the stage with practiced ease, checking every corner, every mark, every reflection of the light on the polished wood. It was tiring, but satisfying in a way that only comes from effort and dedication. The piano stood in its usual place, waiting. He could not resist it, and he walked over, sitting down on the bench. His hands hovered over the keys, remembering the feel of them, the sounds they could make. He pressed one key, then another, letting the notes fill the empty hall. The music was soft, hesitant at first, but it brought memories, emotions, and a sense of life that he had missed. He played slowly, carefully, as if each note were a conversation with the past, with the dreams he had once held, and with the child he loved. Sometimes he played for longer than he intended. The hall remained empty, silent except for the music, and he felt a strange freedom. No one was watching, no one was judging. He could let himself feel, let the emotions flow through his fingers and into the room. He remembered teaching himself to play as a young man, the hours of practice, the joy of mastering a difficult piece, the pride of performing in small recitals. Those moments had shaped him, had given him discipline and patience, and now they were returning to him in fragments. Through the music that poured quietly from the piano, he thought about his child, imagining them learning, exploring, asking questions, making mistakes, and discovering the joy of music. He realized that life could be both hard and beautiful, that responsibilities and dreams did not have to be separate, that he could provide love and guidance while nurturing creativity. The piano, the stage, the quiet moments, They were a bridge to that understanding, a way to show the child that life could hold more than struggle. The evening came slowly, and he had to leave. He wiped his hands on a towel, checked the stage one last time, and stood for a moment, listening to the fading echoes of the music he had played. It was a small, private performance, but it mattered to him. He felt a quiet satisfaction, a sense of connection to something larger than himself. The work, the music, the child, they were intertwined, forming a life that was simple but full of meaning. At home, he prepared dinner, helped with homework, and listened to stories of the day. The child laughed, asked questions, and shared little victories and frustrations. He responded with patience, encouragement, and love. These moments were exhausting, yet they were the heart of his life, the reason he continued to work so hard. He knew that one day the child would understand, would appreciate the sacrifices, and perhaps even find inspiration in them before bed. He sat with the child, reading a story and talking quietly. He watched the eyelids grow heavy, the small body curl up under the blankets, and felt a sense of peace. Despite the hardships, the long hours, and the struggles of single parenthood, there was joy here in the quiet connection and shared love. The piano, the stage, the music, they waited silently, ready for the day when he could play not just for himself, but for the world. As he finally prepared for bed, he reflected on the day, on the moments of care and effort, on the small joys and quiet triumphs. Life was difficult, but it was filled with meaning. The responsibilities, the work, the love, they all intertwined, creating a story of resilience and hope. He fell asleep with thoughts of the stage and piano lingering in his mind, a quiet promise that one day the music would not remain unheard, that the life he had worked to protect and nurture would also shine with its own brilliance. The next morning, he returned to the hall earlier than usual. The air was cool and quiet, with a faint smell of polished wood and dust still lingering. The sunlight had not yet fully reached the windows, leaving the room in soft shadows. He knelt on the floor, rag in hand, carefully moving across the stage once again. Each stroke of the cloth seemed to carry a rhythm of its own, and he found himself lost in the simple pattern, letting thoughts wander freely. Today felt different, though he could not yet name why. There was a quiet anticipation in his chest, a tension that hummed under the surface as he worked. He paused for a moment, standing up to stretch. His eyes drifted to the piano, sitting in the corner like an old friend who had waited patiently. The keys gleamed faintly in the dim light, black and white lined up in perfect order. Something about the way it sat there made his heart skip. He could almost hear the music it was capable of, the sound filling the room and echoing against the walls. He felt a strange urge, a pull he had not felt in years. He brushed the dust off the keys, and the action of cleaning them made him remember the countless hours he had spent practicing, learning, discovering the joy of music. It was a memory he had tucked away, but it was alive again, whispering to him. Finishing the last section of the stage, he stepped back to admire the shine. The floor gleamed under the soft light, reflecting the piano and the empty chairs. The work gave him satisfaction, but today it was not enough. His eyes kept returning to the instrument. He moved closer, hands hovering over the keys, as if waiting for permission from some unseen force. He pressed a single note, and it sang clearly, slightly trembling at first, but solid and true. He pressed another, and another, letting the sound fill the empty hall. Each note was a spark, awakening old memories and stirring emotions that had been buried under years of responsibility and hard work. The music grew in confidence. Slow at first, careful, deliberate. He remembered the melodies he had loved to play, the songs that had once filled his room with warmth and light. The hall responded in its own quiet way. The sound bounced off the walls, moved under the stage, and seemed to embrace him in a strange, comforting hug. For the first time in a long time, he felt a part of himself coming back, the part that had been silent but never gone. His fingers moved more freely now, more confidently, as if remembering their old strength. He played not to show off, not to perform, but to express the feelings that had no words. As the music filled the space, he noticed the faint sounds of people stopping outside the hall. Curious murmurs, the shuffle of feet, the quiet pause of people drawn to the unexpected melody. He did not look up, did not stop, but he felt the energy shift. It was as if the hall had invited the world to listen, and some were answering. Their presence was invisible, but felt in the way the echoes carried, and the way the sound lingered longer in the corners. The music was no longer his alone. It was reaching out, touching others without needing to announce itself. The piece he played was not planned. It was spontaneous, drawn from memory and feeling. Each note carried something of his life, his struggles, his quiet victories, and the love he had for his child. He played with both joy and sorrow intertwined, letting the hall hear the story of years lived in quiet perseverance. The sound swelled and softened, rose and fell, moving like the tide of his emotions. It was not perfect, but it was honest, and in that honesty lay its beauty. He caught himself smiling faintly, remembering small moments with the child laughter, shared meals, quiet bedtime conversations. Those memories intertwined with the music, creating a tapestry of sound and feeling that was rich and textured. The piano seemed to respond, each key an extension of his heart, each chord resonating with memories and hopes. He played for a long time, lost in the music, lost in a world where responsibility and creativity could coexist, where life's hardships and joys could meet. Outside, more people had gathered without realizing it. They paused in doorways and hallways, listening to the haunting, beautiful sound emanating from the hall. Some whispered to each other, eyes wide, captivated by the unexpected performance. They had come for other reasons: work, errands, meetings, but they were held by the music, unable to move, caught in a moment that seemed to suspend time. The hall was alive, though no one could see it, alive through the music, alive through the quiet man whose fingers danced across the keys. He did not know the crowd had formed. He only knew the music, the rhythm, the feeling that he had finally released something he had carried for too long. Each phrase told a story of struggle, of hope, of love, and of resilience. The notes did not need explanation, did not require applause. They were understood by anyone willing to listen, and they were being listened to, even if he was unaware. The piano had become a voice for what had never been spoken, for what had remained inside quietly, patiently, waiting for the right moment. Time seemed to stretch. Hours could have passed, or minutes. He played without thinking, without judgment, letting the music guide him. The hall, polished and empty, became a vessel for expression. Each chord reverberated with the weight of experience and the lightness of fleeting joy. His heart felt full, unburdened, as if something had shifted within him. He realized that these quiet moments, these small acts of courage to follow one's passion, even in solitude, were powerful beyond measure. Finally, he slowed, letting the music fade into gentle echoes. The hall was silent once more, but it was different now. The air seemed warmer, the space somehow more alive. He lifted his hands from the keys, heart still racing, eyes shining with a mixture of relief and wonder. He did not know what he had accomplished, but he felt the weight lift, felt the release of years of unspoken emotions. The music had done something he could not yet name, something transformative, something that touched not only him but the unseen audience that had gathered quietly in the shadows. He rose and stepped back, taking in the polished stage, the piano, and the empty chairs. The space felt sacred now, as if it had held its breath and watched. He realized that music was not just sound, it was connection, expression, and understanding. He had played not for fame, not for recognition, but because it was part of him, because it was necessary, because it had been waiting for this moment. And now it had arrived. He did not look for reactions. He did not seek applause. The satisfaction was internal, deep, profound. Yet he sensed the presence of others, even if they remained unseen, and he knew that the music had touched them. The hall seemed to hum with quiet acknowledgement, as if it too had listened and understood. He felt gratitude not just for the piano, not just for the stage, but for the chance to give voice to a part of himself that had remained silent too long as he gathered his things and prepared to leave. He realized that something had changed. The music had transformed the space, and perhaps, in a small way, it had transformed him. The anticipation he had felt that morning had been fulfilled in a way he could not have predicted. He walked toward the door slowly, heart still light, hands steady, carrying with him a quiet confidence that life could hold beauty, even in its routine, even in its solitude. The hall, the piano, and the music would remain, waiting for the next moment, waiting for the next act of courage, waiting for the next story to unfold. He returned to the hall a few days later, carrying a small bag with a bottle of water and a cloth for the piano keys. The air felt different today, almost alive with anticipation he could not explain. The stage gleamed under the soft morning light, each corner polished to a shine. He had cleaned it several times before, but today the floor seemed to hold more energy, almost as if it remembered the music that had recently filled the space. He knelt down, moving the rag slowly across the wood, lost in thought. Each movement felt purposeful, almost ritualistic. He was preparing, though he did not yet know for what. He rose, stretched, and glanced at the piano. The black keys glimmered faintly, the white keys pristine. He sat on the bench, feeling the familiar chill of the keys under his fingers. A note sounded soft and clear, and he smiled faintly. Today he felt something different. There was a quiet presence in the hall, not visible, but palpable. People had begun arriving early, quietly slipping in from the edges of the hall, drawn without knowing why. Some paused at the doorway, heads tilted slightly, listening to the faint beginning notes that he allowed to escape. He played gently at first, hesitant, letting the sound settle, letting the hall respond. The music began to flow more freely, richer and deeper than before. His hands moved with confidence, each note carrying a piece of his heart, his memories, and his love. The hall seemed to breathe with the sound, echoing the melody, stretching it across every corner. Those who had gathered silently were transfixed, their movements frozen as they absorbed the beauty and raw emotion. There was no need for words. The music spoke for him. It told of sacrifice, hope, resilience, and love. It spoke to anyone willing to feel it, and these quiet listeners were feeling every note. He noticed small gestures in the audience, hands clutched together, heads tilting, eyes closed. Some leaned forward, drawn to the sound as if trying to capture it in their own hearts. The music did not demand attention. It commanded it gently, naturally. Each chord resonated with honesty, not perfection, but with depth. The people listening could sense the years of life behind each note, the struggles and the moments of quiet triumph. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a voice for the man and for all who had felt the weight of unspoken emotions. As the piece grew, the dynamics shifted. Soft passages became strong. Loud chords carried urgency, then retreated into tender whispers. The audience felt the rise and fall of the music, their own hearts moving in tandem with the melody. Some remembered lost loved ones. Some felt hope they had forgotten. Some were simply mesmerized by the beauty of someone expressing themselves without fear. He did not stop to look at them, but he could sense their presence. The way they were drawn into the story his fingers told on the keys. The hall seemed alive. The walls absorbed the sound and returned it. The ceiling reflected the echoes. Even the polished floor seemed to shimmer with the energy of the music. He felt connected not only to the space but to everyone who had gathered silently, forming an invisible chain of attention and emotion. His mind was clear, focused on nothing but the notes and the feelings they carried. He was present in a way he had rarely allowed himself to be, fully aware of the moment and its power. A shift came in the music as he reached the middle of the piece. The melody softened, carrying vulnerability, carrying loss and longing. He remembered his child's first steps, the quiet nights spent comforting, the long hours of work that had never been thanked but had been necessary. The music held all of that, transforming memory into sound, creating a bridge from his life to those listening. He could feel their hearts responding, even without seeing their faces. The connection was intangible, but undeniable. A shared understanding created by honesty and courage. Some of the listeners were moved to tears, quietly wiping eyes, breathing heavily, unable to move from where they stood. Others held hands over hearts, their expressions soft and reflective. A few whispered to each other, sharing astonishment at the unexpected performance. The music seemed to reach a part of them that had been quiet for a long time, unlocking emotions and memories they had not confronted in years. None of them had anticipated this when they arrived, yet none could leave. Drawn fully into the hall and the sound, he reached the final section, a series of chords that carried resolution and peace. His hands moved with grace, speed, and precision, but without hurry. Each note landed with intention, each pause allowed space for reflection. He imagined the child's face, the small smile, the quiet pride, and that thought lent strength to his playing. The hall responded, the audience responded, and even he responded, feeling a release and a fulfillment that was rare and deep. He was no longer just a man playing a piano. He was a storyteller, a messenger, a conduit for emotions too complex for simple words. As the final chord lingered, he let it fade naturally, allowing silence to settle like a soft blanket over the hall. For a moment, no one moved. The sound had left a mark, an imprint of feeling that could not be erased. The audience exhaled together, a collective recognition of what had been shared. Then, quietly, softly, one person clapped. Another followed. Soon, the clapping grew, not loud, not demanding, but filled with admiration and gratitude. He stood slowly, looking around for the first time, and finally saw the faces he had not noticed before. They were people of all ages, strangers who had been drawn to the hall by an invisible thread, now united in awe and respect. He felt embarrassed at first, not used to attention or praise. He smiled faintly, unsure of what to say, realizing that words were unnecessary. The music had said everything. He felt a warm presence, the gentle acknowledgement of people who understood without needing explanation. Some approached him cautiously, thanking him quietly, expressing wonder at the beauty of what they had heard. Their reactions were sincere, unpretentious, and he realized that he had created a moment that mattered, that had reached beyond the ordinary. That had touched hearts. He stepped away from the piano, letting others approach it and inspect it if they wished, allowing the hall to breathe again. The polished stage reflected the sunlight now streaming through the windows, the piano keys glinting, the chairs arranged neatly. The space felt transformed, filled with the energy of connection and shared humanity. He understood then that music was more than sound. It was a bridge, a gift, a way to communicate what could not be spoken. The people lingered for a while, reluctant to leave, as if afraid the magic might disappear. He watched them quietly, feeling satisfaction, humility, and gratitude all at once. There was no need for him to play again immediately. The hall held the memory, the audience carried it forward, and the piano would wait for the next moment. He felt a profound sense of purpose, a recognition that his life, his choices, his sacrifices had led to something beautiful, something lasting. Finally, he gathered his things and prepared to leave. The audience slowly dispersed, but their expressions carried the mark of what had occurred. Some whispered to friends, sharing astonishment. Some walked away quietly, lost in thought. Some lingered near the doorway, casting glances back at the stage and the piano, reluctant to leave the moment behind. He felt a deep satisfaction, a quiet joy that filled him completely. He knew that the music had changed something, if only slightly. All in every person who had heard it, walking out into the evening air. He felt lighter, freer, and more connected to life than he had in years. The world outside the hall seemed brighter, the sound sharper, the air cleaner. He held the memory of the audience, the sound of the final chord, and the echo of countless emotions in his heart. The music had not only touched them, but it had also touched him, affirming that he could still create, still inspire, and still live fully despite the challenges he faced. He carried that feeling home, ready to share it, nurture it, and return to it whenever the world felt heavy. Knowing that something magical had occurred, quietly, profoundly, and forever etched in memory. The next morning, he awoke with a quiet sense of purpose. The memory of the previous day's music still lingered in his mind, echoing softly like a gentle tide. It had been a remarkable moment, Yet he approached the new day as if nothing extraordinary had happened, returning to routine with his child. Breakfast was prepared, the child's school lunch packed, and small conversations shared over simple meals. But underneath the normalcy, he carried a lightness that had not been there before. A quiet understanding that life could hold beauty even in the midst of struggle. He walked with the child to the bus stop, holding hands as always. Today, he noticed the way the sun glinted on the streets, the way the morning air felt fresh and alive. There was a subtle joy in the small things, a bird chirping, a neighbor waving, the laughter of children playing in the distance. He realized that the music had changed his perception, had opened a window in his mind to see ordinary life differently. The act of expressing himself through the piano had shifted something within him, making the world seem brighter, more full of potential, and more connected at work. He carried on with his tasks, but he felt an inner calm. The polished stage, the piano, and the memories of the audience's faces gave him confidence that his life had meaning beyond the daily struggles. He noticed details more clearly, the subtle creases in the wood, the gleam of the stage lights, the faint smell of the hall. Each observation reminded him of the connection he had felt the day before, and he felt gratitude for the small joys that often went unnoticed. In the evening, he returned to the hall. This time, the audience was different. A few had heard about the music the previous day and had come purposefully, curious to witness it again. Others were drawn by chance, hearing the faint notes as they walked nearby. He did not announce his playing, did not prepare speeches. He simply sat at the piano, hands resting lightly on the keys, feeling the familiar chill and texture beneath his fingers. One note, soft and tentative, escaped, and the hall responded with its quiet echo. He played slowly at first, testing the resonance, then allowed the melody to flow naturally, freely, as if it had been waiting for this moment all along. The music carried the story of his life. Struggles endured, moments of joy, love for his child, and the hope that never died. Each chord and each pause expressed something that words could not capture. The audience listened, rapt, feeling the honesty in every note. Some closed their eyes, letting the music take them back to their own memories. Some held hands over hearts, moved to tears. Others simply stood still, letting the sound wrap around them like a warm embrace. He was unaware of their precise reactions, yet he sensed the power of connection, the invisible thread that tied performer and listener together. He played for a long time, losing track of ours, caught in a rhythm where the past and present intertwined. Memories of the child, of family moments, of hardship and perseverance, flowed into the music, shaping it naturally. The piano was more than an instrument. It had become a voice for emotions he had carried silently for years. Each note was a testament to resilience, love, and hope. The hall seemed to hum with energy, absorbing the sounds and returning them with depth and warmth. The empty walls were witnesses to the story he shared, keeping it alive in their silent embrace. After the piece ended, he let the sound fade gradually, leaving the hall in quiet reflection. For a moment there was stillness, as if time had paused. Then softly, one person clapped. Another followed. Soon, the applause grew, gentle but genuine, a recognition of the beauty and sincerity he had created. He rose slowly from the bench, a faint blush on his cheeks, feeling a mix of pride and humility. He did not need praise, but he accepted it with quiet gratitude. People approached, sharing their admiration, expressing wonder at what they had experienced. Their words were simple but heartfelt, acknowledging the courage, the honesty, and the skill behind the performance. As the audience slowly dispersed, he lingered in the hall, allowing the echoes of the music to settle into the space. He reflected on the transformation that had occurred not just in the hall, but within himself. Music had always been a part of him, but now it had found an audience, a voice, and a purpose beyond his own private world. He realized that moments of beauty and courage, even when performed quietly and without expectation, could ripple outward and touch others in ways he had never imagined. Returning home, he shared the experience with his child, describing the people who had listened, the emotions that had filled the hall, and the small sense of connection that had been created. The child listened attentively, eyes wide with curiosity. and offered the small gestures of pride and admiration that parents live for. Together, they reflected on the power of expression, on the ways in which creativity and courage could shape lives. These conversations, though quiet, carried weight, planting seeds of understanding and inspiration that would grow in the child's heart over time. Days turned into weeks, and the memory of the performance continued to influence his life. He returned to the hall regularly, polishing the stage and playing the piano. It's not always for an audience, but knowing that the music had a life beyond himself. Word had spread quietly through the community, and more people came to listen, drawn by curiosity and word of mouth. Some came for the music itself, some for the story behind it, and some simply for the quiet solace that the hall now seemed to offer. Each time he played, he felt the connection deepen, not only to the audience, but also to his own sense of self and purpose. He continued to navigate the challenges of single parenthood, balancing work, responsibilities, and the small joys of life with his child. Yet the piano and the music had become a source of strength, a reminder that beauty could exist even amid hardship. He noticed the child beginning to explore creativity, experimenting with sounds, humming melodies, and showing curiosity about the piano. These moments were small but meaningful, a continuation of the legacy of expression he had begun. He encouraged exploration, celebrated discovery, and offered guidance, fostering a sense of wonder and resilience. In time, the hall became a place of quiet gathering, a community drawn together not by spectacle, but by shared experience and emotion. People came to witness the music, to feel its presence, and to connect with the humanity that resonated in every note. The man remained humble, performing not for recognition, but for the simple truth of sharing, creating, and connecting. His story, his music, and his dedication inspired others, showing that even ordinary lives could produce extraordinary moments when courage, skill, and love came together.